But it's always interesting whether a player is young or more established or starting or professional and or national team, et cetera, to just help them in their journeys. I think supporting young people or people who could be my kids, or not all, of course, but the young adults, supporting them. They have families, they have issues. There are always things to address.
Welcome to a new episode of Most Memorable Journeys. I have a fantastic guest today. She is not only a very interesting person, but she's also a friend. She is, as far as I know, the only female football agent in Switzerland. She is multilingual. She's very smart. And everything else that I know about her, if I wanted to talk about it, it would take me half an hour, and that would be the end of this episode. So let's dive into it. Welcome to Most Memorable Journeys, Stephanie Molina y Vedia.
Hello, Elizabeth. Great to be here with you.
We just recently met. You were here in Cyprus for what you do for a football event. You come here regularly, we meet up, and every time I see you, there is something new and something interesting coming up. But I want to start from the beginning. I want to start because this is called Most Memorable Journeys, and I want to know how this journey started, because you are also a very interesting mixture. You're half American and half Argentinian.
That's correct. Well, yes, it's my journey will take me back across a few countries, actually. I grew up in Texas, in Houston, to mixed parents. My father was an Argentine doctor. My mother was an American diplomat. They met in Argentina many years ago, and they moved to the States so that he could set up his practice in Texas. And I come from a large family. I'm the youngest of 7 children. And I would say I grew up in a quite privileged household. My father was a big kind of Renaissance man, intellectual. My mother was very sporty and loved to cook. And it was we grew up in quite a Latin way, I have to say, and speaking Spanish and English. So Spanish has always been a love of mine. And it's so much that I studied languages at university, and I ended up eventually making my way to Europe. And I was a commodities trader, actually. It was my first job, working in Russia and trading metals. And then I made my way to Spain and Africa. I worked in many different countries, and I finally ended up, I was doing that for 15 years. And I loved that. It was a fantastic job. I spent a lot of time in Africa. And it was a beautiful, learning experience on many levels. And then I ended up being able to make the shift into football many years later, after I had moved here to Switzerland. So yes, and we can also go into that.
Yeah, that's a lot in one in one paragraph. Commodities trading, is that stressful? Do you have to I don't know much about commodities trading, but do you have to take fast decisions, or how does it work?
So it really depends. I worked in the physical trading of metals, which means the physical shipping, the mining and extraction and refinery of metals, specifically cobalt and nickel, cobalt and copper, because they're mined together. So I was not involved in what they call the terminal trading side, which is what you think of the London Metal Exchange floor. Or
that's in my head when I hear that.
Exactly, the calls and the puts and the options, the shouting at each other across the room. That's a different kind of trading. I was working in the shipping of shipping vessels and containers across the oceans and on land. So stressful, I would say it was. I loved it. I mean, I really thought that I had the best job in the world because I was able to travel, which I loved. I was able to use my languages, and I was able to learn really from the best. I had the opportunity to work for a huge international company, Glencore, which is world renowned, a real giant. So that opened a lot of doors. And I also had the opportunity, well, the privilege to have a boss who was very open minded because, again, at the time, especially very, very male dominated industry. But my boss was very open, and it was a level playing field, as we say. And he promoted women in the department, but it was a fantastic job. I loved it. Stressful, yes, because it was, of course, the stakes were high. You were doing big deals, and you needed to perform, and there was high pressure. But I loved it. It suited me very well.
I know you speak Russian. How long did you spend? How much time did you spend in Russia?
I actually didn't live in Russia too long. I mean, my love for Russia started actually when I was an adolescent, a teenager playing the piano. I had a Russian piano teacher, and she taught at home, and her little boy used to run out during our lesson and speak, and she would be like, "Tika, tika, malchit," which means like, be quiet, and go send him back to his room. And I was kind of became enamored with this language, and so I studied it in high school, studied at university. It was the first job I had coming out of college, actually, and I ended up. It was the summer of whatever it was. I was 21 years old, and I was sent to work in. Well, first I'd gone to study, so I spent a summer in Moscow, traveling all around, and loved it with the language institute. And then after university, I was sent again to work with in the export of helping basically in the traffic and logistics of the export of cobalt and nickel. Actually, was and scrap metal. And then again, from Switzerland, when I started here at Glencore's head office, I also got involved in Russia. So yes, it's always been a love of mine.
Yeah, but I have to sort of now do something. I mean, nobody needs to know how old you are, but when you were 21, Russia was the Soviet Union, wasn't it?
Well, yes, I have to say that the wall. No problem. I'm lucky because I got to experience it during very interesting times, and of course, at that time, and I remember I actually interviewed for the NSA when I was at university. And I interviewed for the NSA of course, what you do is you decode you decode the codes which come across. You intercept and decode them, interpret them. So it was a very strategic. My mother had come from a background of her family had come. She was originally from Virginia, and her parents and full family had worked for the CIA, and the NSA, of course, is part of the Defense Department. And but I did not get selected because of the fact that I had spent time in Russia, and they thought it was all bizarre. But yes, kind of a crazy story. But it was a time where the wall was coming down. The wall had come down when I was at university, and it was all very murky. It was all very mysterious. And I went there. It was all very, very state driven. This is long before you had this huge explosion of wealth, with these what they call the new Russian, the new wealth. And this was during the time of Gorbachev, basically. But I loved it because it was, it's a country which lives for the arts, literature, ballet, sports. So that was the side that I was really enamored with. But you're right. It's completely transformed now and all broken up.
Yeah, I get you because it's so coincidental and so funny. I I'm writing a book. I told you about my times as a tour guide. And this morning I was writing about, I did a tour in the Soviet Union in 1989, no, 87. So I was actually writing about Moscow and Leningrad, and I was writing about the buildings and an evening at Bolshoi and the Winter Palace in it was at the time Leningrad. It is so beautiful. And I know exactly what you're talking about because this is the big problem of misunderstanding Russia.
Mhm. I mean, I specifically remember one of the things that's really stuck in my mind about that summer is we got on a bus and we drove from Moscow to then Leningrad. And that was the time I remember I was with a bunch of university students from all over the states. And we were listening to, that was back when we had what was it called? Not like, God, not, I was not, it was, like anyway, whatever was listening, these cassettes, I guess they were cassettes, right? And our Walkmans, that was it. We were listening to our Walkmans and we were listening to Natalie Merchant, 10,000 Maniacs. That was the band at the time to give you some perspective. And I remember when we went into Leningrad, and well, first we had seen the palace, the Dvorets with the fountains, which I thought was just extraordinary. I still have pictures. And then, of course, the Hermitage. And the Hermitage for me was just one of the most spectacular things that I've ever seen. I was completely taken over by the city, and it was just a beautiful new world, and also just the gateway to the West. But it was something that most Americans, I guess, had not been able to experience, and there was so much depth and beauty that it was astounding to me. I thought it was the most poetic nation in the world.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. Totally get that. And now, as I was listening to you, because we have plans to go to several places, I think that should be one on our list as well, to go back to Leningrad, to St. Petersburg now.
I would love to do that. Now it's probably not the right time, but I would love to do that. And I also have always had a curiosity about the Baltic states, and especially now Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia. But Estonia inspires a lot of curiosity. But I would love to go back and see how things have transformed, or maybe not. There's some things which are iconically the same, which is wonderful. But there's a lot of now with the different republics like Georgia and Azerbaijan, Armenia, etc. There's also a lot to see and a lot to experience and appreciate as more independent states, because before they were kind of all entangled in the Soviet ideology. But no, it's a fascinating place. It's endless. It will always be. I'll always hold it in my heart.
Now let's move forward a little bit. So you had this fantastic time and travel around and do commodities trading, and then you end up in Switzerland of all places. After all these adventures, that must have been quite a bit of stability coming to a country like Switzerland.
Well, it really was. It was a great time because I had just gotten a promotion from Glencore. I was in the Madrid office, and I lived in Madrid for 9 years. And Glencore is the head office is here, and I guess we were at the time, I think it must have doubled now, but there were about 300 people. And it was really, there was a management buyout of Merckich in 1995. I came here in 2000. And this was the time when the company was actually exploding. But it was still very non-corporate. So you had a lot of freedom. And I came here as a young person. I was single before I got married. And the world was really like, I felt like I was really on the world stage because it was a powerful company. And I came here and it was wonderful to be around all these young professionals. So it was a great time in my professional life. I mean, this was really the start of, uh, of a lot of, learning and development professionally. So I loved it.
I'm a bit envious actually of all of that, what you did, because this sounds fantastic. Traveling for business. I can see you. I can actually see in my mind how you were chatting around the world and looking important.
I have to say, I remember also that, in the beginning, I'd come from Madrid and very, very fashion conscious, and I remember when I first started Glencore, I was, every single day I would dress up and I would have my scarf on and I was perfectly coiffed and made up. And it was so wonderful. Of course, the time goes on now. I've gone into a completely different era of my life and work for myself. And, it's not quite the same level of presentation when I go to the office every day, but I guess that just happens. But no, it was really fantastic. And it really set me up for being able to, there were so many takeaways and so many valuable moments and being able to see the world in that way. I mean, I remember Japan was one of the trips that was especially interesting because it was I was impressed by how much they work. I would fly in on a Monday, be horribly jet lagged, and with the office there, Saito-san was his name. He would have scheduled 30 meetings in 5 days or 4 days, and we would be like machines on autopilot, one after another, having to learn all the rituals of sitting in these meetings. When to drink the tea, how to sit up, how to present the card, all these things. And but it was exhausting. But it was, we were dealing with big companies, Hanwha, Matsushita, Honda, setting metals and trying to move the world. But no, it was a great way to see the world. It was the best way.
Totally get it. And then you got married and then you had children. And then this interesting part of the stories starts where what I actually introduced you as, which is a football agent. And I know the story, but I want you to tell it to our listeners. How does somebody who travels around the world, okay, you have all the knowledge of mentalities and cultures. That certainly helped. But how do you become a football agent as a woman?
Well, I get asked this question so often. And I normally, the occasion normally doesn't allow itself to for me to tell the whole story, which is also kind of a personal story. So I know you do know the story, but and I'm happy to share it here. But I had no intention of becoming a football agent.
Well, I will interrupt you shortly. You can make it as personal as you want to, but you have to be aware that people are listening to my podcast in 130 countries. So
it's no problem. It's no problem. I had no intention of becoming a football agent. I had no intention of getting into football. And my journey into football was a deeply personal one. I have 4 children, as you know. And after the third, I had been going and going in commodities nonstop, traveling. There was always a baby in tow. I remember I would take my newborns to conferences. I was nursing them. I nursed, all my kids for 3 years, it seemed like. And it was a lot of hard work, traveling and managing. And I was fortunate to have help. I had a nanny to help with the children, so that my husband also was working, also in commodities, traveling. But it was exciting. And I wanted to have a fourth child, but this was a bit ambitious given my schedule and everything that was going on with the family. And so honestly, I wanted to take a hiatus from commodities. I wanted to take some time off. I had gone without a break and I was tired. And so it was after one of the trips in Japan that I said to my then boss, "Look, I think I need to call it quits. At least take a break," which is what I did. And I got pregnant with my fourth child. And unfortunately, the pregnancy did not go well. And it was problematic. Um, and I ended up, long story short, but I ended up actually having to go into the hospital when I was 26 weeks pregnant. And it was kind of a horror show because I had felt a bit misled by the doctors at the time saying that, oh, it's fine, it's going to be okay. And I actually should have really been on bed rest a lot earlier. And I guess I just thought, I'd had 3 amazing pregnancies and been able to be active and travel, and this was all going to be fine. I guess I just thought that I was kind of, you know, like unstoppable. But that kind of came to a grinding halt when I went to the hospital at 26 weeks, and I ended up actually going into labor at 27 weeks. And this was when the real horror show started because most fortunately, I was already in the hospital, but the labor happened in such a way that um, it was, I remember that, I'll never forget this. I was watching uh, this Argentine movie, actually. I think it's called Abrir los Ojos, or it's something de los Ojos. They think it's called, they also translated it into English, but with Ricardo Darín, it's a famous Argentine movie. And I remember watching it and going into labor and kind of just sort of, reaching for the alarm to summon the nurses to say, I need help. And they came in, and I just remember kind of becoming very dizzy and kind of being out of it. And they came in and they were saying, oh, like they put the monitor on and everything. And then suddenly there was a rush of doctors coming in, and they basically said, oh, we've got 8 minutes. We've got 8 minutes. And of course, I was really, I guess I was starting to become unconscious or something. It was all very scary. I remember they wheeled me into the operating room, and I just remember the woman saying, "What language does she speak? What language should we speak?" And then her kind of stroking my hair, telling me it's all going to be okay. And then, of course, I woke up later, and my baby was gone. And I didn't even know if I'd had a boy or a girl. And my husband was next to me. And I just remember feeling completely just the shock of being pregnant one minute and suddenly you're not the next. And the baby's gone. And is everything okay? Was is she okay? I learned that it was a girl because I heard him spelling the name. In Switzerland, you have to give the name when the baby's born. Him spelling the name of the girl, Abigail. I heard the A-B-I. I said, "Oh, I've had a girl. I'm so happy. I was hoping for a girl." And they said she's in the intensive care. And of course, the aftermath of that was, I stayed in the hospital with her for 3 months. And she was okay. She 88 days. There's all of these eights. 88 days. She got out 2 days before her due date. She weighed 900 grams. So it was, unimaginably small, but incredible care in the Lucerne Hospital. And when I got home with her, finally, it was I was very, very fragile. The whole family was it was a really emotional time because it was hard for me to take care of the older children. I had gotten a nanny to come and take care of us. And it was a couple and they lived in. And it just so happened that the husband was a professional footballer and very nice from Spain, lovely guy, very hardworking. And they basically came in and they took over and just did whatever was necessary. They really rose to the occasion and he did everything for us. You know, he was quite exceptional. He could cook, he could clean. He organized fitness classes for the ladies in the village. He organized camps for my boys for playing football. He came in and did everything. He made everyone's life better. And you know, he said, "Oh, my dream! I've come to Spain, come to Switzerland to make a better life. And my dream is to be have a football agency." You know, and we had a lot of time to talk because I was homebound. And he said, "You know, could you help me? You have contacts, you speak languages. Could you help me with start up an agency, or could you help me kind of get the ball rolling here?" And I said, "Look, I know nothing about football. I don't know if I have any contacts in football. It's true that I am happy to cold call and network, et cetera, but I'll try to help you because you're a good person and I would love to see you succeed, but I have no intention of getting involved with football." So he wanted to play football on an amateur level. He had already been playing in different countries, but he had come here and he was older. I was 27, 28 at the time. And so I landed him a trial with Hom, which is not far from here. He ended up getting a contract, and then I got him another contract. These just small amateur contracts or semi-professional. And then he said, "Look, you know, I really would like to see if we can do a transfer." And I said, "Again, you're great. I'm so grateful for everything that you've done. I have no intention of getting in football. I don't even know the rules." Okay. And so he said, "Look, it's fine. I'll guide you through it. You know, just I'll bring the player, you make the calls and we'll try it." And I said, "Okay, fair enough." And so I'll never forget, it was with FC Zurich, with a center back from Argentina. So he rocks up and he says, "Look, I have this center back from Argentina. He's a free player and he's available. So, you know, call and present him, see what they're looking for, see if he matches." Sami Hyypiä is a famous star from Liverpool, was the coach at the time. And this was in 2015, I believe. And I called him up and I said, "I'm so-and-so." And nobody, basically, in the football world, okay? No one knew me, nobody. And I had the center back and whatever. They looked at the videos and they said, "Oh, yeah, he's quite interesting. He's a free player, you know, his financials are easy, whatever." And they said, "Well, yes, we like him. We'll be happy to make you an offer." And I was just like floored because I thought, wow, that's easy, you know? I don't have any idea what I'm doing, flying by the seat of my pants. And they wanted to make an offer. They did make an offer. They ended up signing him. I remember that I was completely clueless as to, you know, how much money I should ask for, what's the commission. And I was just, because I didn't really care, I wasn't counting on anything working. But we ended up landing the deal. And I thought, wow, you know, that's easy. I thought I could just kind of dip in and out of the business and do it like that. So, and I remember thinking, so I spoke to my husband and he said, like, honestly, like, you don't even know the outside rule. Like, how are you going to do this? Like, this is a male world and it's a huge industry. And of course, everything he said was true. And I just said, "Look, you know, I'm going to go for this," because it was almost like it was an adventure. And it was actually, we made a bet. So we made a bet in the kitchen. And I said, "Look, I bet that I can do this because when I put my mind to something, I can do it." And I really, really wanted to help. Jaime is his name. And so that's what happened. And so I made a bet and we started working. We did this deal, we did that deal, we did this deal. that deal. And then, of course, later in 2017, I founded the company. And by that time, I had learned, I was on a massive learning curve. I had learned. And then, 2 years later, I had to get my FIFA license because they had reinstated the licensing requirement. But I was on a massive learning curve. But it was football found me. I never looked for football. So it's true that I am the only female agent in Switzerland, and one of few in the world. Actually, they're not too many. So no, honestly, it's the hardest job I've ever done.
I have several questions now. But question number one, do you know the rules now?
I know the rules. And as much as I wasn't looking forward to studying for the FIFA exam, it actually was a great tool because it forced me to learn a lot of the rules, which most agents never really need to know. But it also gave me a huge level of confidence because I did the work, I did the diligence, I did well on the exam. It's a very important thing now to have the exam, to have a license, because you're not actually allowed to work as an agent without it. So of course it's crucial to get it. Otherwise, you have to collaborate in a way that's more bothersome. But no. But the learning curve was massive, I have to say.
It makes you credible, doesn't it? The FIFA license, it gives you credibility.
It absolutely does. And it also is really good that the way that they've stated it now, FIFA, that every year you have to continue with your learning. You have to do a couple of courses and maintain your credits every year. So it keeps it fresh in your mind, but it also continues. You have to continue to learn about new things that are coming on, like more safeguarding practices and things. No, it's really good. I have to say, as hard as it was, and there was like 700 pages of reading material and rules and regulations, it was not easy. But no, I'm very, very happy I did it.
I have another question. Did you make any commission with that first transfer to FC Zurich?
Well, I don't know how explicit I should be here, but this is a funny story and I told this the other day, and I don't want, look, this isn't to show off or anything, because I just want you to know that it didn't have the ending that it should have. But, and that was one of the things, football, obviously it can be lucrative, but you also spend a lot of money. So I just want to keep it in perspective. Okay. It can be lucrative, and for successful agents, it is. But one also spends a lot of money traveling on, expenses, also helping players often. But this particular deal, because he came as a free player, meaning that they didn't have to pay a transfer fee. And at the time, Zurich was managed by the president and his wife, and so it was a different recruitment system. But I had no idea. I remember calling a friend who worked in football and said, "How much should I ask for? How much should I ask for this commission? I have no idea what I'm doing. What do I do?" And he goes, "Oh, a free player of this caliber, maybe, I don't know, maybe ask for 100,000 or something." I'm like, okay, well, I thought, well, look, I've just come out of Glencore, we're like, at Glencore, we like shoot high, right? Like and I have nothing to lose because I'm sure it's not going to land anyway. So I said, oh, I think I'm going to like ask for, I don't know, 250. It was a game. I'm telling you, it was an absolute, like it was in Disneyland or something. And I'll never forget that I did ask for that thinking, wow, this is fun. Like, this is amusing. And they came back a day later. They said, okay, we'll call you. And they're like, we're not going to give you 250, but we'll give you 230. And I was like, I was completely like, what? I was like, okay. Now, no premature celebrating, people, because just know that in the football world, there was the agent in Argentina. There was my colleague here. So all of that has to be split. And that's over the life of the contract, and only provided that the player stays. So just so that you know, while it sounded like, an extraordinary deal, and it started off being that, was the first part of the commission they paid, but then um, his wife ended up not wanting to stay. And after a year of, they wanted to renew him at very good numbers. Of course, we were all excited. But then he ended up going back to Argentina to our disappointment because the wife didn't settle, the family didn't. Anyway, so they didn't pay the rest of it. But it was one of those things which just, it's almost very, very surprising.
Well, it's a story to tell. And I think it's funny as well. But now, to become a little bit more serious when it comes to, let's say, somebody who's listening here is a football player or thinks of him as a good football player, and he does a little bit of amateur football, or maybe a mother who is listening who has a son or a daughter, I guess now. How does this work? How do you actually, do you contact an agent right from the beginning, or does a coach of that amateur club? How does it work? How do you become I don't know, a transferred football player?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm actually designing a course for parents because I feel like there's such a need in the market to bring this kind of clarity and understanding to parents. Most of the time, it comes through the clubs which have academies. I mean, most players who are talented, let's say in Europe and in the States, let's just say, if they're, and not always, right? Not always. But I mean, the mainstream pathway would be, for example, an academy here in Switzerland. We're talking about the Swiss market. You've got FC Lucerne, which has a very good academy. You have FC Zurich, FC Basel, and they have the lower categories. So they're being scouted, they're being watched, they're being scouted, and they'll get picked up by a scout if they're talented. And then the idea would be to bring them up through the divisions until they eventually get into the first team. Of course, in other countries, in maybe third world countries, for example, there's an incredible amount of talent. In Africa, again, these talents often, I mean, I was speaking to an agent recently at the summit in Cyprus who picked up a player in, I think it was Senegal, literally off the street by watching him because he was there, saw him, had an eye for him, thought that he could be developed. Sometimes there are tryouts and trials, camps organized by certain clubs or companies who offer these things, and players can show up to go. But I would say that, not everyone who follows the pathway becomes professional. It also depends on not only talent. In fact, talent's only a small part of it, but really the vision of playing the long game, but literally the vision of taking the necessary steps in a coherent kind of way. And many players, I'd say, because you might have a lot of players at 14, 15, 16 who aspire to be professional, but then of course they have school to think about if they want to continue and if they actually want to make this a career. But for parents, I think it's not an easy decision because they don't know how the industry works. They don't know whom they can trust. They don't know how to pick an agent because believe you me, there are a lot of agents out there who are very opportunistic in terms of they just might see a player as kind of a commodity that they can make money on. So, I mean, the pathway to becoming a professional is varied, but there definitely, I think, is a need to support parents so that they can help their kids make these decisions or see that if it suits them, because they might think that it's glamorous and everything, but the reality of being a professional is it's a short career. one also has to think, what are you going to do afterwards? And it's normally football related. So, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think doing a course for that is a fantastic idea, and I think you have a worldwide audience for that, and you can do this course in how many languages? Six you speak? You can do it in languages.
Well, I speak English, Spanish, French. I had to learn German here, but my German is definitely not as good as yours, Elizabeth.
Well,
And of course, Russian, I say is a bit rusty now because, I've had to, because of my kids here, I've really had to focus on the German. But no, for sure. I mean, in terms of English, Spanish, and French would be fantastic to be able to deliver this course to parents. And you're right, it is a massive audience. And I really do think that there's a problem to solve. I think, if anything, allowing them to be able to make an informed decision about, whether to go pro or not. Because sometimes it might not suit, even for families. It's a big sacrifice on families to support their kids in this pathway. Certainly in the younger ages, it's a huge sacrifice, and it's not for everybody.
And it's not just football. I mean, every professional young person is a lot of sacrifice, and it's going away from home, and maybe coming across the wrong people. And I think you really should do that. I have another question that may not be so popular now. Are football players divas? Big ones, famous ones.
Well, actually, some are, yes, for sure. Some are obviously not. I mean, the ones who enjoy, it really depends on where they come from and how, just like anything, where they come from, how they were raised, what kind of values they have, what's important for them. But I would say, when you're talking about huge stars who are making, crazy amounts of money, and they can almost permit, I say almost, any kind of behavior, and they have a huge audience, and they're wildly popular, and, the world is their oyster, and they can be pretty diva-like. I mean, but I think it's difficult to really know, because what you see on television and what you see in their social media and what you see is definitely and not always the person. I mean, to give you an example, I had a wonderful this gala dinner last weekend in Cyprus. David Luiz, which is the Brazilian international ex-Chelsea player, very top center back, wonderful. I would say he's never been a diva, but he's played for some of the top clubs in the world, really one of the best center backs. And he was a special guest, and he got on stage and told us a story. And his story was very, very compelling, very heartfelt, very down to earth. And he received everyone afterwards with autographs and with hugs, and very, very warm, Brazilian, typical, very, very warm person. And his story was very interesting. His parents were teachers, and they were never home. So he had to learn at an early age to cook and maintain. I mean, I'm talking really early, like 7, he said. He was cooking for himself and doing things. A lot of the most successful footballers have come from the most broken situations, the most impoverished countries, and often are the most successful because they are the biggest fighters, because it's either that or get involved with drugs, be in a gang, or go to jail. So there's also this kind of socioeconomic, cultural dynamic that's thrown into it. But some are divas, but I would say on the vast majority are not.
Yeah, no, I it's kind of they are just humans like everybody else, and it, as you say, it depends on their story, it depends on their environment. And I think it's very, very fascinating. Probably the most, I don't know how to say that now, but I think football is more important than politics. I think football is the most influential thing in the world. Do you agree?
I do agree. And it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. It captivates an audience of billions and billions. We've seen the numbers at the World Cup, in Qatar, and of course the one coming up now in the States this summer. It's also a huge instrument for social change. You can do a lot with football. Football players can reach huge audiences and do really powerful, positive things. But yes, it's a passion that has swept the world. I would say it's the single most sport, which is very universal. And now, it's an industry which is multi-layered, and there's a big intersection with sports and entertainment. There's a big intersection now, of course, with tech. There's massive investments in tech now to bring, data and, virtual experiences and fan engagement at the stadium, away from the stadium. It's a huge industry. In fact, it's that's kind of the exciting part about being in it, is that I guess if you ever get sick of one part, you can always go to another.
Yeah. I have one last question because we're coming to the end. If you could choose any football player in the world to represent as your client, who would it be?
That's an interesting question. No one has ever asked me that. I love Griezmann, the French player who plays for Atletico de Madrid and is now just signed for Orlando City in the States. I love his story. He came to Real Sociedad when he was a youngster. He's very, very emotional. I watched his Netflix. I thought it would be really, really wonderful to work with a player like that. But, there are many players. There are many fantastic players and fantastic human beings out there. And I think it's a very difficult choice to make, but he kind of sticks in my mind. But it's always interesting whether a player is young or more established or starting or professional and on a national team, et cetera, to just help them in their journeys. I think supporting young people or people who could be my kids, or not all, of course, but then young adults, supporting them. They have families, they have issues. There are always things to address. But yes, it's not an easy question.
I know, it's like asking somebody, what is your favorite country? It's the same thing. Nobody, it's difficult to answer. But whoever is listening here, Stephanie Molina y Vedia is a very warm-hearted, tough football agent. So if you have any questions or if you want to be represented, get in touch with her. And we are looking forward to that course. I'm making you accountable. This is the kickoff conversation for this. So I will keep asking you, how far are you, Stephanie, with that course? And I want to thank you so, so much for spending time with me this morning on Most Memorable Journeys.
Thank you so much. Keep in touch.
If you enjoy my podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. You will find all the information in the show notes.